Welcome, LA Progressive friends and family and readers. Again, Dick and I are joined by Bill Blum. Bill Blum is a former judge and death penalty defense attorney. He's the author of 3 legal thrillers published by Penguin Putnam, Prejudicial Error, The Last Appeal, and The Face of Justice. And he's a contributing writer for the California Lawyer magazine, as well as the LA Progressive, as well as Truth Dig, right?
And the
And the
Progressive.
Progressive magazine.
Oh, and the Progressive magazine. And so today, actually, this piece was originally published with the Progressive magazine, and you've graciously
That's
allowed
right.
us to republish it here. And here we're talking about Julian Assange. Whew, a lot's been going on in the Assange arena. Let's talk,
Certainly
Bill.
has. So on March 26th, the High Court in London, a 2-judge panel, issued a judgment which basically delayed a decision on the extradition of Assange to the United States, pending the submission by the United States of various assurances that would be in place if the extradition goes through. Those are that Assange would be able to rely on the First Amendment in his case. Second, that he would be given all the due process protections of a U.S. citizen. And third, that the death penalty would be removed. The U.S. has until April 20 to submit those assurances. Now, in Britain, this kind of appeal is not an appeal that one has as a matter of right, but it's discretionary with the court. And given how long Assange has been in the appellate process, that's important to bear in mind at all points of our discussion, because if the High Court denies him the right to appeal, he might be able to file another petition with the Supreme Court in Britain, but probably his next and only recourse would be to the European Court of Human Rights, which would be an uncertain kind of gambit. So let's get back to what is happening in Britain. In 2022, the British Home Secretary issued an extradition order, approved the extradition order to send Julian Assange back to the United States, or to the United States, where he would go on trial for 18 felony counts for espionage and conspiracy related to the publication of a trove of documents dealing with the U.S. wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. The history of the criminal charges against Assange in the United States actually goes back to 2017, when the Trump administration Department of Justice filed a criminal complaint against Assange. Criminal complaint is different from an indictment in that it doesn't involve a grand jury. And in the federal system, that's really a placeholder for an indictment. An indictment's issued by a grand jury. So the first indictment came down in 2018, only it was all done secretly. The public didn't know until 2019 that Assange was actually indicted. And the current set of charges is set forth in a second superseding indictment that was filed in June of 2020. So that's what's at issue. And Assange, of course, is trying to avoid extradition. Now, I wrote this article from a different perspective from that which you'll see in most Julian Assange pieces. Most of the pieces that you read on Assange, on the progressive left, for good reason, take as their core perspective Assange's interest in avoiding extradition and avoiding being tried, which of course makes perfect sense. But I wanted to expand our purview a little bit to look at the interest that the other side has in dropping this case. I don't think the Biden administration wants to extradite Julian Assange. I don't think it wants to try Julian Assange. And I don't think that's because they are acting or will act out of the goodness of their collective hearts. They will be acting out of their political and legal self-interest. And this isn't the first time that we've seen in the press rumors that the United States is seeking an off-ramp. The most recent set of, I'll call them rumors because they haven't yet been confirmed, came from the Wall Street Journal, no less, just this month, that the US is considering offering Assange a plea bargain whereby they would allow him to plead to a misdemeanor. They allow him to do it remotely from London, and then he'd be set free. The US would drop the extradition. Now, in 2023, in the summer of 2023, just last summer, Kathleen Kennedy, our ambassador to, was it Caroline Kennedy, our ambassador to Australia, said that the United States was thinking about a plea bargain. And that story was covered by the Australian press, wasn't very widely covered here. And that tells me that the United States would really like to get off this case, but it has to do so in a way which sort of saves face and which avoids what I call a pending First Amendment catastrophe. Not just from the general perspective, if you read left-wing commentary, that Assange's First Amendment rights are being imperiled here. Because legally speaking, he probably doesn't have any First Amendment rights. He has free speech rights, but those are general moral, political, and human rights kinds of things. But he doesn't have technically First Amendment rights because he's not a US citizen, not a US resident, and he didn't commit the alleged acts while he was inside the United States or any of its territories. So I point all this out. And what I argue is that the First Amendment interest that I have and that we all should have is that this will have a boomerang effect on other US publishers. And it also has an effect on the public as consumers of information. Now, as far as the document dump on Iraq and Afghanistan is concerned, there's never been a contention that what Assange published was untrue. So I have a right to read what Julian Assange published. That's a First Amendment right. People don't usually think of the First Amendment in terms of the consumer of speech and publications. They think of it in terms of the rights of the speaker. So again, I try to do something a little different from what everybody else is doing, not because I want to be different, but because the main argument, the core argument, which I support, which looks at Julian Assange's interests, is really vital, but everybody else is doing that. So I want to look at the other side too. And
so Bill, I was intrigued by one of your points there, that another reason that the present Biden administration might want to easy out by having Assange plead guilty to a lesser charge is I mean, right now the Biden administration suffers from a lack of enthusiasm. All the enthusiasm is by Trump's hardcore nutcases. But there is a small but vocal, very vocal group of progressive Assange defense activists, including us, and who may be lukewarm about Biden for good reasons and bad. But if Assange were able to walk free, I think they would line up behind Biden and applaud that and give him a little boost in a very important race.
Well, one
that's
question.
right. That's the fifth point that I make in the article.
I know.
But you know what I was always curious about, Bill, is that Barack Obama, when he had his chance to arrest Julian Assange, he talked about the New York Times problem, the fact that what the WikiLeaks published was also published by the New York Times and was also published by a couple of other publications. And so, you know, this business of just going after Julian Assange for being a publisher and using the Espionage Act, Barack Obama would have nothing to do with that. So Julian Assange was safe until Trump came in. And then we thought, the activists that have been supporting the and urging that Julian Assange not be indicted even. Then when Biden came in, he just continued what Trump was doing. And I always wondered, why do you think he did that?
My guess is that Joe Biden wanted to seem like he was tough on crime, that he wasn't a tool of the radical left.
I see.
And it was, as you say, really disappointing. And he did it pretty early on, February of 2021.
Yeah.
So it's true. The Obama era policy was not to indict Julian Assange. And I just want to make another brief comment so that people listening to this get a fuller picture of US law. In the Pentagon Papers case, which is the seminal case that we all talk about, that was a prior restraint case. And what that means under the First Amendment is that the courts and the government have very little authority to stop a publication from releasing sensitive government documents, from publishing them ahead of time. But the decision doesn't say that after a publication does post those sorts of documents, it can't, after the fact, be prosecuted. People don't realize that. I went back and I read the decision last night. It doesn't mean that post-publication, the New York Times couldn't have been punished. But all of our administrations subsequent to that case have not done that because of the horrible boomerang effect that it would have, and because of all sorts of vagueness concepts of what is a prohibited publication. But you can imagine certain kinds of publications that would result in prosecution. Let's say somebody got a hold of the nuclear codes and said, I'm putting them on page 1. I can guarantee you that that would be stopped. Sure. And that any publication that did that would be punished. But it's something that in the area of prior restraints, we almost never, ever do, and the court would not approve. And in the area of post-publication prosecution, we haven't really done. And I think that insofar as Julian Assange is concerned, the government's treading on really weak grounds here. Because if you read the second superseding indictment, Assange is being charged with being a hacker, not a publisher. But if you get into the weeds, for example, the government's relying on the testimony of some teenager who was allegedly working with Assange. And that guy has recanted his testimony already.
Yes. Yes.
So the government's case is really going to be based on a lot of testimony from Chelsea Manning, who for various reasons is probably not going to make a great witness.
Yeah.
I don't know where her loyalties or her political allegiances these days, but in any event, bottom line, she's a convicted felon. So you have the same sort of problem that you do anytime you use somebody as your star witness who's got a felony conviction. You think of Michael Cohen in the upcoming Alvin Bragg case involving Stormy Daniels and the hush money with Donald Trump. It's a problem. So I think they've got a weak case. They've got a First Amendment catastrophe on their hands. They have Obama-era policy that they're going against. And they could get this political boost, as you say, and as I think they would, if they would just drop this case. Now, the question to my mind is when, because I don't think that they want to bring Julian Assange back here. Can you imagine the government would then be charged with weaponizing the Justice Department against free speech, which is exactly what Trump is claiming in his cases. Only in that case, they're not doing it. But in this case, they would be doing it. But nonetheless, the public would hear weaponization of the First Amendment, Biden administration, and Biden support among progressives, which may be small, but in this election could be decisive, would be further eroded. So my advice for everybody is push the Biden administration to resolve this case. You can do it in your ideologically pure way of saying, drop this case, don't go forward with it another moment. It's probably not going to go anywhere. Or you can say, look, drop this case. It's in your own interest. Get smart. Take this case off the books. Don't extradite Julian Assange. The time to do it is right now, because if Assange loses before the high court, it's possible he could be extradited here before the election. I think that would be a disaster for the Biden administration.
And I think that it would receive more media coverage if it happened at that point than it would have happened otherwise. I mean, the Assange case hasn't gotten a lot of corporate media coverage, but if it happened right before the election, I believe it would.
I do too.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing being, trying to work with the Assange Defense Committee and so forth is it's always not entirely puzzled, but this has dragged on for more than a decade. And why is that? And I think it's because Assange embarrassed the wrong people. I mean, he embarrassed our military. The most damning thing out of what he revealed was the collateral murder tape, which is if a picture is worth 1,000 words, well, that film is worth 1,000,000 words in turning at least part of the country against what we were doing in Afghanistan and Iraq. And the other group he embarrassed is Hillary Clinton's campaign, who has lots of people who are still very powerful in the Democratic Party, and they don't want to let it go.
Yeah.
But let's remember, the charges against Assange don't deal with the hack of the DNC and Hillary emails. You're right to say that that's what's bothering people, but that's not part of the charges.
No, I understand that, but there's powerful people who have infiltrated the Biden administration who are still really irritated that he was involved in that.
That's absolutely true, Dick.
Yeah. It's sad to think that someone as small-minded as that would have so much power. I mean, even sad to think that Joe Biden, for political purposes, has allowed this man to be essentially living in solitary confinement for 10 years. It's
All of that's unforgivable.
Yeah.
But what I'm interested in is getting him out of jail.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like practical solutions. Biden has done many really good things. He's done many awful things. Look, he's responsible in many ways for having Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court. His record is what his record is. But what I'd like to do is get Julian Assange out of jail so that he can resume doing whatever he feels he should do. And that doesn't mean that I'll always agree with everything he does. That's irrelevant to me. I want a person who has, by any measure, paid the price for whatever he did, and it's time to get him out of jail and get this off the books. It's been going on way too long.
That's right. Well, Bill, thank you so much for joining us again and taking this bit of information and making it more clear. This is really a complex situation, and that's one of the problems with it. Is it's so complex. It's easier to just boil it down to Julian Assange bad, Joe Biden good.
The other way around.
That's right. That's not the case. So thanks again for joining us, and we're looking forward to hearing from you again pretty soon.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
Enjoyed the reverse perspective.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.